Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and start the webinar. We'll do a brief overview of Vista and then get right into the HPE content. Some of you on the webinar might not have done business with Vista in the past, so we have been around quite a long time. We've got a pretty large customer base across a number of continents, and we've got a wide-ranging set of capabilities and services across our three core competencies. So whether you're looking for sending out some memory upgrades to a number of offices overseas, or you're looking for a forklift upgrade to your data center here in Grand Rapids, let us know and we can most likely help. So a good bit of the content that we're going to cover today is a little bit of what I'd say where I see the HP storage portfolio. I did take a lot of the information from some existing HP decks, but some of the notes and comments are just from my experience in working with these storage arrays over the last 10, 12 years or so, both in selling them, designing them, deploying them, maintaining them, upgrading them. I've had my hands on all of these arrays, with the exception of the Primera, which was just released. So we'll start out with the MSA, and the MSA is a 5th generation, more than 500 units sold. I believe there's more than 300,000 MSA customers around the world. It's got a very flexible and modular design. It's got some advanced data services that you previously weren't going to find in this platform or another what I would consider entry-level platform. Couple of the use cases here, primary storage for 5 to 100 workloads. Will this support more than 100 workloads? Absolutely. But my opinion is once you start getting above 100 workloads or so, some of the better reporting, integration with cloud services, and different fine-tuning capabilities that you'll find in other HP platforms really start to become a little more valuable. So even if we're talking about, let's say, a mid-market organization or a small enterprise, we still do have some nice dedicated use cases for high-density storage or siloed cluster for VDI, test dev, DMZ, etc. One of the things that I really like about this platform is you can start out using direct attached. So you can do direct attached SAS, direct attached fiber channel, and move to a switched environment down the road. So I think it's a great array that can kind of start small and really grow with you. So a quick overview of the 5th generation platform here. We've got the 1050, which does have some scalability and performance limitations, but again, for a lot of our customers that might have 2 or 3, maybe even 4 hosts and a couple dozen or maybe 40 or 50 workloads or virtual machines that they need to connect the array to, it's a fantastic platform. Then we move up into the 2050 and 2052, which have a little more performance and scalability. Really the only difference between the 2050 and the 2052 is that the 2052 comes with some software and some SSDs bundled into it, but under the lid, they are literally the exact same storage array. Some performance improvements from the previous generation, and we'll go into some of the software features that have been around for a little bit, but we do have a few improvements there as well. So here's a quick spec comparison on the 1050 and the 2050, so I'll just kind of let it sit here for about 5 seconds or so, and you can take a look at them. One thing that I did forget to mention initially is our goal here in this webinar is really just to give you a brief overview and maybe even a little bit of a comparison between the platforms. If you'd like to dive deeper into any one of these technologies, see a demo, go through some architecture or sizing conversations, let your account manager know, or you can reach out to sales@vistaitgroup.com, go find our phone number on the web, and we'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you. So in all of the storage arrays, it's going to have the storage management user interface. It's pretty intuitive. It's got some nice capabilities built into it. The setup is pretty easy. Adding and expanding existing pools or volumes is very easy as well. And again, this is going to come with every MSA array. Some of the more advanced features, so I mentioned the difference between the 2050 and the 2052. So when we start looking at the caching and utilizing some SSDs, this is going to require an additional license. I think it's, from what I recall, it's super reasonable. And we, in fact, even if we have a customer that isn't looking at running any of these services out of the gate, we do recommend adding the software license up front. Or again, even bundling it with the 2052, it does kind of make sense from a cost perspective. But this first one, SSD read cache, it's essentially going to be an extension of the read cache on the controllers. So as you can see down at the bottom of the slide, we can really decrease latencies and increase our cache hits by adding some SSDs. We do have automated tiering on the MSA, which I believe this came out in the last generation on the 2040. And the licensing on that was actually quite a bit more expensive, but now they brought the price down on it, which makes it really nice. We've got the ability to essentially put SSDs, 10K drives, and 7200 RPM drives in the same pool, and we can assign volumes to that pool. You'll see in the middle of the slide here, choose our affinity, so performance, no affinity, or archive, depending on what the required cost and performance requirements are of that volume. And almost in real time, the array will move the data up and down and really put it at the right place at the right time. So let's move into the 3PAR. In my opinion, the 3PAR is the most flexible storage array on the market. I almost can't count the number of 3PAR arrays that I've designed and deployed over a number of years. It fits almost every single use case that I've run across. Again, we'll jump into those real quick. So while I wouldn't say that it would be a great fit for kind of your first storage array if you only have 10 or 15 or 20 virtual machines, I think at that point the MSA is a better fit. But as soon as you start getting up into that 50 or 75 either virtual machine or physical workload, I think it's a fantastic fit. It's got some really great services. They've simplified the licensing over the last couple of years. And again, it fits just about any use case. So when we're going to compare this to, let's say, some of the new either hybrid or all-flash vendors and storage platforms out there, there are some limitations around you can't put spinning disk in there. It's deduplication always on, things like that. So what I really like about the 3PAR is you could get, let's say, an 8200, put a bunch of SSDs in it, put volumes on those SSDs, and it behaves like an all-flash array. So you get deduplication, compression, compaction, all those data reduction features and the high performance of SSD. You could also have spinning disk in there, and you could use the automated tiering in the same array. And in fact, we'll go through some virtualization capabilities that the 3PAR has here in a few minutes. You can even have both tiering and SSD, or excuse me, all flash with deduplication and compression happen on the same drive. So you don't even have to dedicate drives to all flash or automated data tiering. So it's, again, a very flexible platform. Great multi-tenant features, both from a security and a performance kind of SLA guarantee perspective. Advanced federation, so whether we're talking about scaling out over multiple arrays at a single site, or looking at a metro storage cluster, or even some long distance replication capabilities, some great features there, and really the ability to fine tune any workload. Again, what I like about it, it's very similar to the MSA. We have some very flexible configurations from how we physically connecting our compute devices to the storage array. We've got direct attached, iSCSI, fiber channel, FCOE, SMB, NFS, object multi-protocol, both with block and file, and running those concurrently on the array. Super flexible. I believe on Fiber Channel we can direct attach up to 6 hosts redundantly. And then again, if you did want to move into on the 8200, if we move up to the 8400, we do have more expandability, or any of the 4 controller models. But with an 8200, you could start out with 3, 4, or 5 hosts redundantly connected to the storage array, not even need storage switches. And then when you did scale to the point where you needed to go to a switched storage environment, you just buy your storage switches when you're ready and you keep scaling. So I'll leave it on this page again real quick. I'm not going to go through all the awards, but again, this is an industry-leading storage array that with their flexibility can fit almost any use case. And we'll move into kind of a review of the hardware platforms, just like we did with the 2050. Hopefully you'll start seeing some commonalities between the slides here. So we can start out with the 8200 with as few as 6 drives. We can move up to an 8400. So the 8200 is limited to 2 nodes. When we move up to the 8400 and also the 2400 and the 9450, that's going to be 2 to 4 nodes. And if we do need to scale beyond what those kind of capacities and performance offer us, we can go up to the 2800 series, and those are going to be 2 to 8 nodes. So again, as I mentioned in the first slide, same operating system, same features across all of the arrays. So whether you're kind of starting out small and you don't know where the growth might be, you could start out with an 8200, and you could, again, federate these kind of horizontally if your growth just starts to get almost out of control. Or again, if we're managing these across a couple of different environments between different size data centers, we've got some remote locations with replication requirements. It's again, just a fantastic and flexible platform. So we'll talk about some of the features here. There are 2 big features that I think are a differentiation with 3PAR. The first one is the fact that they put in an ASIC, a dedicated ASIC, and that ASIC is, what it does is most storage arrays, and we'll specifically talk about, let's say, the 8200 or 8400 and kind of that entry-level range. It's almost, you're not going to find another storage array out there that will have an ASIC in that range of storage arrays. Generally speaking, in the very few vendors that do have ASICs, it's going to be in their enterprise or high-end arrays. We're getting this in an 8200 with 6 drives. What that's going to allow you to do is a lot of the competition just has a general purpose CPU, and that's going to be doing all of our storage provisioning, our thin provisioning, our deduplication, our RAID, our data placement, our rebuilds, our reporting, our logging, our analytics, our alerting, literally everything. That general purpose CPU is doing everything. So when we start looking at adding tons and tons of SSD and look at processing a lot of throughput of with workloads that really kind of vary in their I/O profile, the general purpose CPUs just have a difficult time keeping up. And a lot of times you'll see on some of the storage arrays with the competition, you can't concurrently run some capabilities because of CPU and performance limitations. Not the case with HP. We've got a dedicated ASIC, so we're going to be able to kind of divide and conquer when it comes to some of those storage kind of requirements. A few years ago, I think it's been a few years, HP really kind of changed how they did software licensing. It used to be a lot of a la carte, then they moved into a couple of packages, and now at this time they've got, when you buy the base array, it comes with a single system software. So all of the software that you're going to need if you're running the storage array at a single site. If we do need to look at multiple arrays at a single site, or we need to look at replication, or again, metro storage cluster or cluster extension capabilities across a couple of different sites, or we need to add encryption, those are the 2 additional options that we have at this time. But again, just a single site, all of the software is going to be bundled in. This is the other capability, and I'll spend a few minutes on it because this not only has applicability with the 3PAR, but also Primera, which we will cover next. So when you look at our kind of traditional array, and I will say that a lot of arrays are starting to abstract this a little bit more, but pretty much every storage array, again, until you get up into the large enterprise, they're going to have, the storage arrays are actually going to provision RAID across the drives. So we do end up having these I/O and capacity silos. And again, like I said, there are some other storage arrays that are doing a better job of bringing multiple RAID groups together and putting them in pools, like the MSA. But there's the potential for kind of hotspots, and it does make things a little, can make things a little challenging. You want to make sure your RAID sets are all the same across all of the RAID groups in the pool and things like that. So that's kind of our the traditional way of managing our storage. And again, even if we've got some nice abstraction capabilities that right above where you don't see that in the user interface, a lot of those limitations are around when we're talking about competitive arrays here. So we're going to have our LUNs, we've got our RAID 5 set, and we've got our RAID 1 set, and if we need to expand that out and add more drives, and let's just say for this example, we've got, we started with 20 drives and we added an additional 20 drives. We are going to, a lot of times, have to dedicate spare space, spare drives, as well as a snapshot pool. This is vastly different from the way that HP and also Primera handle provisioning the data and actually landing the data on the drives. Rather than a 600 gig drive showing up like a 600 gig drive to the operating system, the operating system is going to take that 600 gig drive and break it down into 600 1 gig chunklets, and then we are going to provision our RAID on those chunklets. So a single drive could have RAID 1, RAID 5, and we can also change our set sizes. So we could have RAID 5.5, RAID 5.8, we could have RAID 6.8, RAID 6.10, or 14, with 14 in that last example being the number of chunklets that are in each stripe. But again, regardless of the set size, we're going to stripe the drives across all, and in this particular case, to compare it to the left-hand side, we've got 20 drives. Regardless of our set size, we're going to stripe that volume and that kind of virtual RAID set across all 20 drives. If we need to add an additional 20 drives, we have the ability to add those in and run a couple of commands and restripe that data across all of the new drives. Add it, oh, again, wrong way. Added more volumes, and again, it kind of just fills up from there. The other benefit here that isn't talked about a whole lot is the fact that we also distribute our sparing across all of the drives. So the primary benefit of striping the sparing across all of the drives is when we go to do our rebuilds, on the left-hand side, you'll see that we're rebuilding if we have a failed drive, we're essentially reading from 20 or 30 or 40 individual drives and rebuilding that to a single drive. And when we look at doing it on the 3PAR, we're actually rebuilding that across all of the available drives in that tier. So again, our rebuilds happen much faster. So here's the SSMC, and again, I'll kind of compare this to the MSA a little bit. This is the SSMC is incredibly powerful. The reporting and the analytics and the threshold alerts that you can set on this thing are just awesome. The troubleshooting capabilities, and now that we've got 3PAR has the ability to use InfoSight is just absolutely incredible. Probably one of the most powerful monitoring and management platforms I've used in a storage array. So a lot of the things that I mentioned and talked about on the 3PAR are going to be kind of overlap with Primera. The way that I'm looking at it today is it's built on 3PAR technology and that awesome kind of legacy of high availability, performance, great features, great virtualization and abstraction capabilities. with more of a Nimble-like flexibility and simplicity. Very similar, we've got a single operating system for the entry-level model, which we'll touch on here in a second, all the way up to the four-node systems. And here, let's talk about use cases and maybe compare it real quickly to the previous two storage arrays we discussed. Rather than starting out at 5 or maybe even 50 workloads, now we're talking really where it fits, especially because the kind of price point with the controllers, there's a lot more going on with the controllers these days from both a capability and performance perspective. Now we're probably talking about the use case from hundreds to tens of thousands of workloads. Again, great multi-tenancy capabilities, advanced federation, ability to fine-tune any workload. But what we're also going to add here, and this again is where we're starting to see a little bit of a blending between 3PAR and Nimble, in my opinion, some really great cloud integration and the ability to rapidly integrate new technology into the systems, and we'll touch on that here in just a moment. Today we only have fiber channel. I believe in January, February timeframe, iSCSI should be out as well. We do have direct attach similar to 3PAR, but the one thing that I do want to note here is right now we don't have any file services capabilities. So again, when we look at 3PAR being the most flexible storage platform, in my opinion, out there, and Primera moving a little more into that kind of nimble simplicity, we do have some configuration limitations, but I think the trade-offs, and we'll talk about a couple of those trade-offs here, are most certainly worth it where it makes sense. So we have a new architecture. So in the kernel, that's the core of the operating system, direct access to the hardware. It's going to be high speed, and really one of the things that allowed us to I'll go ahead and move this slide out here. Moves a lot of the capabilities and features of the Primera out into that user space is the increase in performance on our CPUs. So this really is going to allow, as I mentioned on the last slide, more rapid adoption for new features. With 3PAR, the operating system really remains in the kernel, so as we make improvements and changes to tiering algorithms or introducing a brand new feature, it's going to take a lot more quality control. It's going to be because the risks of making a mistake, I mean, it could bring down a storage array. Where now we're running a lot of those features and capabilities in the user space on Primera, so we do have the ability, number one, I don't want to say that the quality control and the testing is going to be any less, but we've got the ability to deploy those new features and capabilities in the fields a lot faster. And if there is a minor tweak or a bug fix, again, that can happen a lot faster. And when we look at combining the things that I just mentioned with InfoSight, it really just kind of changes the game when we're looking at Primera and where Primera and the development of it might, I don't want to say contrast or overlap with 3PAR, because 3PAR is still a very viable platform. But I think some of the next generation capabilities, we're probably going to see those more on Primera than we will 3PAR. Again, just my opinion. So again, overview of hardware here, most specifically on the 670. I believe, I should have probably double checked this before we started this, but I believe even though we're on 4 nodes on a 670 versus on the 3PAR platform, we could go up to 8 nodes. I believe the number of ASICs we're going to get in a 670 4-node system is double what we would get in an 8-node system. So again, from a scalability and performance, we should be right in line between 3PAR and Primera. And actually, Primera is going to, the new ASICs and the new CPUs just really take the performance capabilities to the next level. We've mentioned a lot of this, but what I'd like to touch on again is the 100% data availability guarantee. I think that's really a combination of moving some of those features out into the user space versus the kernel, as well as the new controller architecture, as well as the tight integration with InfoSight really is going to allow us to, or allow HP to have that 100% guarantee. I want to talk about a couple of items here that are, again, moving away from kind of the three-part tradition into the more of a Nimble-like environment. Number one, with three-part, we do have to have either a virtual storage processor or a physical storage processor, kind of going back to that highly available, the external service processor allows us to be a little more resilient for monitoring and updates and things like that. Now with the Primera, we are going to have an on-node management and performance dashboard. And secondly, we are going to be able to do customer self-update options. So again, this is where we're starting to see some Nimble-like operational capabilities that are built into the powerful platform that has always been 3PAR. So we'll move on to Nimble and then spend a few minutes on InfoSight and wrap it up. So Nimble, and I want to spend just a second here and talk about InfoSight before we get into it. When you look at Nimble, I think one of the big reasons that HP purchased Nimble was for InfoSight and the analytics and just the vast amount of data that they've been collecting over a number of years. It's just an incredibly powerful platform that we're starting to see on some other HP hardware environments. So we've got, with Nimble, all-inclusive licensing. So even over and above what MSA and 3PAR and Primera have, they do have a couple of different bundles. Nimble is all-inclusive. Timeless storage, so as long as you're keeping your HP service contract current, you do have the guarantee to, on a couple of different controller upgrades so that you don't have to do a platform refresh, forklift refresh when it comes time to upgrade. We've got all flash, hybrid flash, and secondary flash. We're pretty much going to spend our time on all flash and hybrid flash. If you would like to look at secondary flash, which is really great for backups, we can most certainly have a conversation around that. Great cloud integrations with cloud volumes. There are some really good use cases around data availability and offloading some of our data, inactive data, to a cloud service provider. So again, if you'd like to learn a little bit about that, we'd be more than happy to do so. Scale up or scale out. So HP has some really good documentation around the number of the drives that are available, the upgrades for the Nimble, the number of additional enclosures you can add to a Nimble storage array, but we also have the ability to scale out. I believe it's up to 4 Nimble systems in a cluster to provide more capacity, more performance in our environments. So use cases, I'm calling it here dozens to thousands of workloads. So a little bit higher starting entry point than the MSA, but we've got a really big overlap between kind of the MSA and 3PAR. With the Nimble kind of in that SMB to mid-market, solidly kind of mid-market customer, and maybe even into the small enterprise. In my opinion, when we try and talk to our customers about making the decision between the 3 platforms, it's going to come down to you want a lot of nerd knobs, or you want kind of the push button turnkey. You want cloud integration and advanced analytics, or you want to go with more of a traditional kind of monitoring and support mechanism. So again, even though there is some overlap depending on where you are in kind of your private cloud journey or data warehousing or DevOps or whatever it might be, we can help you navigate those waters. What we do miss here, and this is something from a design perspective to take into consideration, we do need to look at switching, so we don't have direct attached options on the Nimble here. So this is the all flash array, so we can start all the way down with the AF20Q. And move that all the way up to the AF80. And again, Nimble has some great documentation on what the upgrade options are within the family. Same thing with the half-full hybrid flash 28H, all the way up to the HF60. We've got some great expandability options and upgradability across the arrays. So a couple of Nimble feature updates. Previously, we only had deduplication in some of the data. We always had compression, I believe, across all the models. But now we have deduplication across both all flash and the hybrid flash models. That really is can be contributed to, again, similar to the Primera, increases in processor capabilities. So again, kind of moving down, new chassis enables rapid adoption of latest Intel CPUs and new media. So we are NVMe and storage class ready, storage class memory ready, better performance, more memory, and what kind of the items on the left-hand side really contribute to is the two bullets on the right-hand side. So we've got increased scalability and performance at a flat or lower kind of cost curve. If you looked at a Nimble in previous generations, and it might have been you like the capabilities, you like the story, but maybe it was a little out of your price range. Let's take a look at it again, because we've most certainly seen the price points drop, and also some better scalability. So lastly, we're going to move into InfoSight. I'm looking at my watch here, and I'm a few minutes over. We've just got a few slides here, so bear with us. InfoSight is not on the MSA. So if it is something that you think is important in your environment, we really do need to look at either Nimble 3-par or Primera. At this point, we're getting close to having feature parity across all of the storage platforms. But if you haven't heard of InfoSight, and I'm really, unfortunately, not going to do it justice here, we could probably do at least a half an hour, if not an hour or two, on InfoSight alone. But really what we're doing is we're gathering configuration and telemetry and performance data across all of the arrays that we see kind of on the left-hand side there, all across the world to not only, I mean, the easy one is predictive failures on drives. Yeah, we can do that. Opening up cases if there are warnings, things like that, and having drive automatically dispatched or someone give you a call. That's the easy stuff. But the amount of data that we're doing analytics against, both for kind of, again, that kind of telemetry and performance data, what's happening underneath the covers, is really what's important here, so that HP can either identify an issue that could be building and proactively address that, or if they start seeing the same patterns across arrays and identifying a new issue, and things like that. So when we look at, again, kind of using data to help us operate our environment, this is something that we can kind of completely outsource to HP for supporting our storage environment. We'll take a look at a couple of screenshots here. So here we've got the dashboard for Primera and 3-par. So whether you've got a single array or you've got a number of arrays, you get this global dashboard on wellness, total capacity, capacity efficiency. So again, if you've got a couple, even if it's just a couple across a number of sites, it is really helpful having this single pane of glass to come into to take a look at everything. And again, while this is just recently released for HP, I think it might have come out maybe 9 months ago or so, I can't quite remember. Nimble has had this for a very long time. So I really like what HP's been doing with this, and incrementally adding capabilities and features for other platforms, and again, the insights that you can get into this are just incredible. And we also have the ability to dive down into an individual storage array or an individual workload, and again, the insights that we can get to help resolve issues or do a little bit of tuning is incredible.